Hello, and welcome to the Fighting Moose podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Jason Hendrickson. This is a podcast where I retell stories, some fictional and some historical, that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. Today, we officially start the holiday season, so I've decided that we're going to read a Christmas book by Thornton W. Burgess titled The Christmas Reindeer. It is 23 chapters long, so I figured I would just read 2 chapters at a time, and by the time Christmas rolls around, hopefully I will have it read. So as we draw near to Christmas, I hope that you enjoy time together as a family and enjoy some Christmas activities. Now, let's turn to today's story. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
To go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The Christmas Reindeer. Chapter 1. Tuk-Tu and Aklak. Tuk-Tu was a little Eskimo girl. Tuk-Tu means caribou. She had been given this name because only a few days before her birth, a relative named Tuk-Tu had died, and as is the custom, this name had been given to the baby. She was well named, for caribou were to have much to do with her life. On the very day that she was born, Kutok, her father, had killed a caribou when food was greatly needed. That year, for some unknown reason, caribou had moved from their usual feeding grounds, and Kutok and his family had to depend almost wholly on seal and polar bear, and these had been none too plentiful. So this caribou had brought great joy to the home of Kutok. In the following days, he found the caribou back in their old feeding grounds. Later, Kutok was to become a herder of reindeer, and the reindeer, you know, are first cousins of the caribou. So it was that Tuk-Tu was well named. Aklak, her brother, bore the name of the great brown bear. Aklak was 2 years older than Tuk-Tu, and gave promise of being like his father, a mighty hunter. Already he had killed his seal, and none knew better than he how to snare the ptarmigan. In the summer, he and Tuk-Tu gathered eggs when the waterfowl came north in untold thousands for the nesting. Whatever Aklak did, Tuk-Tu tried to do. While the children were still small, their father had become a herder of reindeer, and the little folk spent much of their time with the deer. They helped herd them, they did their part at the annual roundup. In the spring, they hunted for stray calves that had lost their mothers. Both learned to drive deer to a sled. During the long winter nights, the herders often gathered in Kutok's house, and there they told stories while the children listened. There were stories of hunting, stories of adventure, stories of many strange things, but the story that Tuk-Tu and Aklak liked the best of all was that of the chosen deer of the Valley of the Good Spirit. This was especially true of Tuk-Tu. She used to dream of that wonderful valley, and whenever she saw the northern lights, the aurora, shooting up high overhead, she would wonder what would happen to anyone who might stray into that valley, for it was said that it was from this valley that those lights came. At last, there came a time when she and Aklak actually were to live for a week or two almost on the border of that valley. Do you wonder that she tingled clear to the tips of her fingers and toes with little thrills of anticipation, excitement, and perhaps just a wee bit of fear? It was the fulfillment of a promise that their father had made them that, when the deer moved over from their summer feeding grounds to the Valley of the Good Spirit, they should go with him to keep watch from a distance. Even Aklak was excited, though he did his utmost not to appear so, and trudged along behind his father, as if visiting the Valley of the Good Spirit were an everyday affair. All day they traveled. That is, they traveled what would have been all day where you and I live. It wasn't all day there, for you know, way up in the north, there is no real night in summer. At last they reached the hut in which they were to live while the deer grazed on the hills of the Valley of the Good Spirit. This hut was a very rude affair, built partly in the ground and partly on the ground. It was of wood and stone, with a skin roof and a long entrance passage. While not as big and comfortable as the house at home, it was the sort of thing these children were used to, and it was quite good enough. That night, after the evening meal, Tuk-Tu begged her father to once more tell the story of the Valley of the Good Spirit and of the chosen reindeer. "Why is it called the Valley of the Good Spirit?" she asked. "Because," replied Kutok, "a wonderful and good spirit lives and moves there." "Has anyone ever seen him?" Aklak asked. "No," replied Kutok. "None but the deer people, and of these only the chosen ones ever go down into that valley. But we know that a good spirit lives there, for always the deer that graze on the hills about the valley are safe from the wolf, the bear, and all other enemies. They do not need to be watched. There need be no herder here, were it not that it is well to know when the herd moves out, for then the summer grazing is over. It is a good spirit, for is it not true that every year 8 deer are chosen, and the next year returned to us, the finest sled deer in all the north? The good spirit dwells there, and with him live many lesser spirits who do his bidding." Thus it was that Kutok told the children of what you and I know as fairies and elves and gnomes and trolls. Eskimo children know nothing about these little unseen people. To them, all are spirits. "Have you ever looked down into the valley?" asked Aklak. "No," replied Kutok. "It is not well to be curious. I am content to stay here and wait for the deer to move. So must you be." "What would happen if one should venture down into the valley?" asked Aklak. "That no man knows, for no man has ever been so bold as even to think of doing such a thing," replied his father. "My son, be wise with your wisdom of your elders and be satisfied. None but the deer folk ever enter that valley, and these only the chosen ones. We will stay here and from a distance watch the herd." "If it is such a good spirit," thought Tuk-Tu, although she didn't venture to express her thought aloud, "why should anyone fear to go down into the valley?" And she was still wondering as she fell asleep. Chapter 2. Kringle Valley. For the greater part of the short Arctic summer, the great herd of reindeer had grazed within sound of the waters of the Arctic Ocean lapping on the beach. More than 2,000 deer were in that herd. They were not all Kutok's, although all were in his charge, for he was chief herder. Only about 200 of the deer were his, as shown by the earmarks. It was in deer that Kutok was paid for his services in looking after the great herd, which was owned by white men. With the approach of the long winter, the deer would move inland to winter range, and Kutok and his family would return to their permanent home. For several days before the opening of this story, the deer had been uneasy. They had done more or less milling. This means that they had gathered in a great body, the outer members traveling in a large circle and trotting tirelessly most of the time. Kutok knew the sign. "They will soon seek the Valley of the Good Spirit," said he to the other herders who assisted him. That very afternoon, the herd, as if at a signal from some wise old elder, began to move inland. In a short time, all the deer but the trained pack animals, which had been fastened, had disappeared. It was then that Kutok had taken Tuk-Tu and Aklak to the hut not far from the entrance to the Valley of the Good Spirit. It was the greatest event in the lives of these two little Eskimo folk, for always they heard this valley spoken of with awe that was almost reverence. Now perhaps they might be permitted to see the wondrous colored mists that were said to rise from it. Kringle Valley was the name by which it was known to the white men, none of whom believed in it, for none had ever seen it. But to the Eskimos, it was, as I have already stated, the Valley of the Good Spirit. Did they not know that on its gentle slopes wild grasses grew in such abundance and such richness as could be found nowhere else in all the world? Were not the hillsides carpeted with wild flowers until they glowed in patches of brilliant color? You see, even the Arctic has its summer. It is a short summer, but a wonderful summer. Up there, above the Arctic Circle, there are days when the sun does not set at all, and the number of days during which the sun does not set increases as one goes north, until at the North Pole there are 6 months and 5 days of continuous daylight. When the sun does set for a few hours, the twilight is so brilliant that it is difficult to think of the day as having ended when the sun disappears. Kringle Valley is a valley of mystery. No man as yet has been privileged to enter it. No man has even looked down into it save from a distance. It is said to be filled with a soft, many-colored mist, which is neither of dampness nor of smoke. The Eskimos believe it to be the birthplace of the ever-changing, many-colored lights of the aurora. Only the herders of the reindeer, which yearly seek pasturage on the hills above the valley, have ever ventured near enough to see, even from a distance, the curtain of many-colored mist. Around the winter firepots, the story is told to the children of how every year, just before the great herd leaves the valley, the deer gather at the upper end and, there for a time, mill. There is no fear among these milling deer. As they trot tirelessly in a huge circle, there is a constant shifting, until in turn each of the bucks has made at least one circuit in the outer ring. Thus each has a chance to show his full strength and beauty. From time to time, as at a signal, one of these trotting deer leaves the circle and stands motionless just without the curtain of colored mist. When 8 have been thus chosen, they disappear in a single file in the mist of the valley, while the leaders of the great herd at once start the southern migration, and the herders know that no longer will the deer feed in Kringle Valley until toward the end of another summer. And the herders know, too, that when the winter roundup in the corrals is made for the yearly count, the 8 best sled deer in all the herds will be missing. They will be the ones which vanished in the shimmering mists of Kringle Valley, and the herders whose deer have so disappeared will rejoice greatly. They will be counted as being blessed above their fellows. They know that their deer are not lost. They know that when, once again, the great herd moves to Kringle Valley, they will find there the 8 deer, fat, sleek, well cared for. They know that these deer thereafter will never mingle with the herd, but will be for as long as they live the finest sled deer in all the world. So it is considered great fortune if, after the herd leaves Kringle Valley, one's deer be found missing.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fighting Moose Podcast. Please join us next time as we read another exciting story. Today's music was provided by the artist Analog by Nature, and the audio clips were provided from NASA. For more information to download and or listen to audio or materials from all our recordings, or to contact us, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com, or you can follow the links in the show notes. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcast or on iTunes, and tell a friend. Thank you for your patronage, and as always, try and do a random act of kindness every day.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle has earned its place in history, and it's come to a final stop.